Hi, Julie. Hi, Tracy. Thanks for attending. Good to see you both here.
Thank you.
We're going to give it a couple more minutes for some other folks to arrive and to join. Okay. We'll just give it another minute or so as people keep funneling in. I'll mention it again, but for those who already joined in the chat, hello, Joey. For those in the chat, you'll see links to both the mini grant, Choose Your Way Bellevue's mini grant program, and downtown parking pilot, which we'll discuss today. Some links that will be in the PowerPoint. I'll mention again later, but just wanted to draw your attention to the links that are already in the chat. Okay, we've got one more joining right now.
Travis, I don't see any links in the chat.
Let me, I did put it in there before people joined, so that might be part of it. Let me resend it, and maybe that'll be better for you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the first one's the mini grant information and application, and the second one's gonna be towards the downtown parking pilot, which we'll talk about again during this webinar here. So 1 second. Okay. All right, well, people may be funneling in as we go, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us here today to learn more about the Choose Your Way Bellevue business services and programs. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. I think everybody's already muted, but please stay muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll have different sections, so go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of each section. This presentation is being recorded and will be available for watch online to rewatch or share. We'll send that link out in the coming days. And there'll be a couple poll questions throughout the webinar as well. They're anonymous, so we will share the results, but whatever you vote will stay anonymous. So just keep your head on a swivel for those poll questions. Also at the end of the webinar, there'll be about a 5-minute breakout rooms discussion. With the amount of people here, we may have maybe 2 breakout rooms. Just give you guys a chance to discuss with each other kind of some of your reopening plans and return to office plans, so forth. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going on the presentation here. All right. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up for those who have their screens on. Beautiful. All right. So with all the housekeeping kind of underway, we're going to get started. So folks will hear from today. You'll hear from myself. I'm Travis Lang with TransManage. You'll also hear from Nicole Rickey, who's our transportation program manager at TransManage. You'll also hear from Andrew Kovid with Expedia a little later on as well. Some of the programs for Choose Your Way Bellevue that you're going to learn about today is our mini grant program, our relaunch of our mini grant program, and a downtown workplace parking and commute management pilot. So with all that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Nicole and she's going to get started on the mini grant program.
Thanks, Travis. So what some of you may or may not know is that we relaunched our mini grant program back in November of 2020. The intention behind this was to help reduce the reduce the drive alone trips to employer work sites, especially as we return the office post-COVID. The grant is geared towards single employer and property managers needing some financial support to enhance activities already underway or to help bring commute programs that wouldn't be available otherwise. The max amount that is awarded for a grant is up to $10,000. There is a caveat with that. It's up to $8,000 for a general project and then up to $10,000 for a daily parking management project. All of the funding that we have is available on a first come first served basis, and it's also on an ongoing rolling basis, meaning you can apply for these at any time. There isn't a start date or an end date at this time. Should that change, we'll definitely let you know, but we welcome any and all projects. Some of the key things that you should think about as you look at the grant as itself is that it's only eligible for Bellevue work sites. The project must support viability and awareness of non-drive alone commuting, and it can't be used to fund ongoing employee benefits that you might already have in place. Next slide. All right, so some examples to kind of help you start thinking about this is that it can be used for expenses associated with offering commuters a daily choice to pay for parking instead of paying that like monthly sunk rate for the entire month. It can also be used to enhance your parking, whether that be the commute options with the software or the hardware of the equipment to kind of help get that launched for that daily parking piece. You can also use it for real-time transit information. So perhaps you might find that it's better to have a informational screen or mobile software that can help any commuter just try to figure out their best way to get to and from work. You can also use this funding for capital improvements. So that could be upgrading some facilities that you already have, whether that's showers, locker rooms, bike cages, signage to help direct people, whether that's directing them for HOV parking or the bike cages or anything that's just going to help promote those programs and give more awareness to your employees. Any campaigns that would help bring more awareness so they know what options are available to you. I know that Travis shared in the chat the link to the actual application, but if you have any project ideas or you're ready to apply, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear those ideas and help facilitate that for you so that we make sure that you're on the right track and we can help you get that application put together. So you can email us at info@cywb.org, chooseyourwaybellevue.org. Once you apply and you think you're ready to go, then you'd move on to the next steps, which would be obtaining approvals from your organization, just making sure that they're aware of and are okay with you participating. And then finally submit that application with everything packaged together. On the slide, we happen to have the link. You should have it in your chat. And when we email out anything, we'll also include that link for you as well. Did anybody have any questions about the grant program? Nope. All right. Perfect. If you do, again, just feel free to reach out. We're always here to help support. Okay, next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Travis. Do we not have? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I missed that you already switched it. My apologies. So we actually had a recipient that we wanted to share with you back from 2016 is the Department of Ecology. They wanted to kind of build out a bike program to help support their employees, specifically employees that carpooled or vanpooled or used public transit to get to work, so they could have some more options to either get to meetings, run errands, get to appointments, etc. So they came up with this program called Commuter Bikes, and that's what they applied for their grant. And with the purchase, or with this grant, they were able to purchase bikes, both a large bike and a small bike, safety equipment like helmets, lights, bells, bike accessories, tools, anything to maintenance, as well as bike link cards for e-lockers. And so they were able to get all these materials. And as they worked through their grant, one of the things that they did is they met with their HR program, just making sure that they had all the safety protocols in place, waivers for staff to sign, as well as safety tips and anything that they can do to ensure that the program would be safe for the employee to use. Tracy who is over the program at the Department of Ecology, said that it was a wonderful program. It was highly used pre-COVID, and they anticipate that once everyone returns to office, that this program is going to be utilized again and continue to be a success. All right, next slide. Okay, so the Downtown Workplace Parking and Commute Management Pilot is a new pilot that the City of Bellevue is designing to test daily parking at a building or kind of a zoner area within the downtown Bellevue area. Employers at a selected location would be able to opt into this pilot. It is anticipated to start this coming fall and last about 4 to 6 months. And with this pilot, it is going to allow employers that wouldn't otherwise be able to have a daily parking program be able to test it out and see if it's a good option, especially as people want more flexibility as they return. It's specifically tailored for people that have fewer than 200 employees. Again, this is just to help support those smaller employers that may not be able to afford to do something like this otherwise. It's a completely free to you option. There's no upfront costs needed from a property manager or an employer that would like to opt in to participate in this program. And some of the funding that we have may be actually used to help incentivize those non-drive alone trips. Again, we're still working on putting this pilot together, and we're definitely having a call for participants as we work through this. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how the pilot is going to work. Right now, the City of Bellevue is looking to identify a vendor that would help partner to establish this platform, however it may look, for participants to be able to be a part of it. One of the things that employees or participants will need to provide is going to be basic information such as their email, the company they work with, and their name. And this is going to be used to actually administer it. The thought is to actually get rid of the monthly parking permits where you're spending, let's say, $200 for this monthly parking permit, and you're going to have to use it every day, and that's your only option. This would allow a daily parking option where you'd only pay for the portion of parking that you use. We find that most people may be able to use van pooling, carpooling, any of those other options, but you might need to drive in once or twice a month just to get to those appointments. This daily parking option, the intention is to actually give you the same privileges as monthly parking, meaning you could come in, park, go to your appointment, and come back, and you weren't going to be paying multiple times. You're just paying for that single kind of day that you've been parking in that site. So that's the intention behind it. We anticipate as people return that they're going to want greater flexibility. And so they're not going to necessarily going to want to buy that monthly parking pass. They're going to want to be able to have those options, especially if they're going to be working remotely some days, coming into the office some days, just have some more flexibility on their decision making of what they're going to do. If this sounds like something that you'd be interested in learning more information about, we have the link on the slide. Travis also dropped it into the chat box. It's an opportunity for you to just kind of raise your hand and say, I would like to get more information. And then as we go through the process of identifying locations and vendors, etc., you can get those updates and be made aware and make those decisions as to whether or not you think that this would be a good option for you or your company to kind of get the ball rolling. And we'll also use it to just let you know if you've maybe been selected, but it's completely unsolicited. We're not going to try to get you anything. It's just really to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. And I think with that, Travis, we have our first poll question.
Yes. So again, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat. We can go ahead and address it. In the meantime, we do have a first poll question, so I'm going to go ahead and launch this. Give you 30 seconds to a minute or so to respond, and then I'll share the results. Pretty easy question. What would incentivize your employees to use a non-drive alone mode? Looks like we're just waiting on 3 more. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling here and share out the results. Looks like most people said credits for car sharing services, and then a couple on savings on driving costs, and we had 1 for transit subsidies. So thank you for taking this poll. Again, it's confidential, but it's good to know where everyone's head's at. And there will be 1 more poll question towards the end, so just keep your head on a swivel for that. Good, stop those results. All right, next up, we're really excited. We're able to have Andrew Koved here from Expedia, going to be able to talk about their daily parking program when they were in Bellevue and kind of the successes that they've had with that. So I would like to introduce, not only is he a self-proclaimed world-renowned cake baker, but he's also the associate with Nelson Nygaard, who's a part of the team who manages the Expedia transportation program. So Andrew, I know this isn't about your cakes, but I think the parking program will be pretty good as well.
Yeah, thank you. No, I would normally share cake with all of you if this was in person, but unfortunately it's not, so you'll have to take my word for it. Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting about our daily parking. It was great to see y'all running that program, and so I'm happy to be a resource for anyone if you have kind of specific questions of what a daily parking program could look like for y'all. I wanted to give you a presentation today about that, so bear with me as I start this. Great. And Travis, y'all can see my screen?
Yes, I see you, great.
Wonderful. Great. Okay. So let's get going. In 2015, Expedia Group announced that they were going to be moving to Seattle from Bellevue. And so they brought on Nelson Nygaard to help start a commute program, looking forward to the commute or to the transition in 2019. So they had kind of 4 years to get the employee base ready. And one of the things about Bellevue is there's a lot of employees living around there, and the downtown is very close to a lot of major highways. So car access in many ways is pretty easy. The Seattle campus was going to have fewer parking stalls and be further from the highway, which presents a lot of challenges, and it's further from many of the regional buses as well. So one of the things that we wanted to do was set up a commute program that was going to get employees ready to make that transition. Seattle as well implements TMP on employers to reduce the drive alone rates below a certain threshold. So as we're thinking about transitioning to Seattle, it can't just be a switch like that. Employees have to have a good experience up to that point to understand how they can go about changing their behavior to be ready for that. One of the ways that we did this and the way that we think about our program is about flexible and convenient options for employees. This is, prior to the pandemic when you would be out and about, but every day didn't look like the next day. Some days you have childcare responsibilities, or some days you're going to a baseball game afterwards, or some days you're just going to work and back and nothing in between. So every day is going to look a little bit different, and helping employees understand that there are a lot of flexible options means that there's a lot of employee education. So that's what we focused on a lot of for the first 4 years prior to actually moving. Our program really focused on data to understand what employees are doing and how we can help transition some of those to non-drive alone modes. So I want to move to kind of how we got to monthly parking and understanding kind of the data behind that. we realized that monthly parking wasn't working for a lot of reasons. It was encouraging folks to drive. They would pay for the month in advance, and then they realized, well, I already spent that money, I should probably use it. We had a challenge where we couldn't provide a parking space one-to-one for every employee who wanted to use it. And that meant that, especially for things like monthly parking, folks would have stalls, not be using them, but we couldn't assign out those stalls to other employees. So a really long wait list, but people weren't actually using them, very inefficient. Carpooling really works with our desire for flexibility. The interest in getting folks to share rides reduces congestion on the roadways, and we think creates a better employee experience a lot of the time. But for monthly parking, they had to agree in advance that they would do more than 80% of commutes together. That's not really flexible. That wasn't something that we were particularly happy with. And then when you pay in advance, you're really not paying the correct price for parking. It's something that employees don't really have a good sense of why parking costs what it cost at that point. So to give you kind of a sense of how we came to a lot of these conclusions, this is one of the graphs that we looked at for parking occupancy. These are the number of days that employees are going to work. This happens to be data from April of 2019, but these are across 4 different garages, and they looked very similar most of the months. What you'll notice here is that for most people, most of the time, they're not coming to work 22 work days a month, or even 20 plus, or really even more than 15. Most people for most of the garages are here 10 or fewer times. This told us that there had to be a better way, that we should be doing something better to make the employee experience better, lower our drive alone rate, and get people prepared for Seattle, where we would want to be using this daily parking program. So we jumped into daily parking. We started as a pilot, so we didn't transition all of our stalls at once. We started as a pilot, understood how it worked, and then rolled it out in Bellevue to nearly everyone. What daily parking allows, and this is kind of counterintuitive, but it actually encourages people to drive on the days that it's going to be useful to them, but doesn't lock them into this monthly commitment. And so it's not encouraging them to drive when it's not the best option for them. What we saw in Seattle, and I'll show you this on the next slide, but more employees out of the entire employee base actually used parking. Like, more people drove, more unique employees drove, but in sum, they all drove less. And this really says that everyone wants the flexibility of being able to park, though in summation, more people aren't actually driving. And we talk a lot about flexibility, but this really lets people find a commute on any given day that's going to work well for them. And maybe that means carpooling. Maybe on one day, it really does work to carpool with other people. And that's a really good option that you can't allow for if you have a monthly program. We found employees were more satisfied, and they're paying the market rate for pricing, but that helps them understand that there's a real cost to parking. So some days when it's worth it to do that, and other days they may not. They're not having to have a weird sense of a subsidized, but it's a monthly pass. So I wanted to just show you this graph. This is towards the end of the presentation, but I think this really illustrates well the comparison. Most employees are not parking a lot. Most employees are parking occasionally. And I think that really shows that we're able to provide a service that works better for more people. Those people who are parking 20 or more days are still able to, but we actually have free stalls. This little note on the side, average occupancy dropped 10%. In Bellevue, our high max occupancy was often monthly, only something like 70 or 80%, which is to say a lot of the time, most of the people weren't using their stall. And this daily parking example kind of shows you how that's the case. Most people are only driving occasionally. It's not a company full of people driving 20 or more days a month. And just to kind of bring this a little bit back to where many of you may be in thinking about coming back to the office, we're all kind of relocating. Expedia relocated from Bellevue to Seattle, but everyone's working at home now, and we'll have to come back to the office at some point. Flexibility is a really good thing. It lets people come back to the office from working from home for a handful of days a week. It's not a permanent thing where they have to decide, do I want to spend $250 on the monthly pass or nothing? That's why flexibility is good, and it lets you monitor how frequently people are coming in using that daily information instead of waiting for the month to see if it's actually being used. Yeah, so I know I ran through a bunch of pieces there, but I'll open it up for questions if anyone has anything for me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm Kathy Whitener. I'm with Puget Sound Energy. And so currently in the Summit building, PSC will cover your parking as an employee.
Yep.
Or you can have an ORCA card, which is at 100%.
Yeah.
So as I'm watching this, I'm realizing that maybe we need to have a hybrid, and some of that has to do with the parking company too. But so did they have both options? I mean, so right now it costs the employee nothing for either venue, but they can have only one.
Right.
And so I've been busy trying to focus on how we can make this work better.
Yeah.
So number one, traffic is already bad and people haven't even really returned back to work at a huge percentage. So I'm thinking, anyway, so what is your suggestion? I mean, has the employee always paid for their parking?
Great questions. Yeah, no, that's a really keen kind of way to dive into this. Yes, so we as well in 2015 had either you could get an ORCA pass or you could get parking. You wouldn't be able to kind of have both tracks, and that's something that we dissolved. We let people get fully subsidized ORCA passes, and they could then pay for parking. And that kind of speaks to the flexibility, which is some days it's more feasible for you to take the bus, and some days it's going to work better for you to drive to the office. The either or makes that really challenging. And folks, I think many folks are just more in the brain space of, well, I default to parking and then I'll pay for transit out of my own pocket. And I think that just creates a barrier for people to do so. And so then they just end up not doing it and default to driving.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of paying for parking, yes, Expedia Group employees pay for their parking, but whereas the transit pass is entirely free to them. In Bellevue, one of the things I didn't quite touch on in those slides is that there was a subsidy for parking. It got decreased. The subsidy got decreased over the 4 years prior to moving to Seattle, and now our parking is market rate. So there is no subsidy any longer. But that's one of the benefits of going to daily parking, is that, as you saw in that graphic, most people aren't actually paying. Most people aren't staying enough days within a month to actually be using what daily parking would cost, what that equivalent is. So it actually saves employees money. Now, people may not be thrilled that you're instituting parking charges, but having them realize the cost of that, I think is pretty powerful. Additionally, since I see some Metro folks on the call, transit's very affordable in a lot of ways, and what they're spending on parking often will be more than what it would cost to buy them an ORCA pass, or put money on their ORCA pass. Kind of the equivalent dollar goes much further on transit than parking.
Yes, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are hesitant to do transit because it does take you longer than if you drive. Well, it depends. It depends on how far you're driving, on how long it takes. But a lot of people have shared with me that, yes, that is the downside, but you know what? They get to work relaxed They're not all hyped up having sat in traffic
Yep.
and, and of course, weather dictates how long that lasts too.
Right.
So, well, and then especially, I'm just picking your brain just to see, if you know of anyone who's an employer who's supported both ways. And again, it all depends on what the parking garage of the building dictates. So, but most of our people, we're doing surveys right now. Most of our people, if they're returning to the office, it's at the most will be 3 days a week.
Right.
So then there, I mean, your little graph illustrates that, so we're talking 12 days out of a month that they might be in the office.
Right. And I don't know how much you're charging for monthly parking. When we piloted our daily parking program in Bellevue, we tried to basically do a full month and then divide out the monthly, how many work days are within that monthly. And so it ended up being very inexpensive for folks comparative to what just a daily street parking would cost them. I do think that did include some amount of subsidy. So I don't know if that's something kind of that middle ground that you're talking about, where you can say, we won't necessarily charge you a daily rate. That would be if you just got a normal surface lot, maybe we'll kick in a little bit of money. But that could be a good way of kind of splitting the difference.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of this, so I'm glad you're presenting this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew, I did have one question in the chat that was directed to me. The question is, did you own your own parking garage? So were you in charge?
Great question. It's a variety of answers. Our building was 333 108th, which is now the new Amazon building. We leased effectively the entirety of that garage. So we had kind of much more control over that. We also had spaces in the Summit PSE building. We also had a couple surface lots that we did as well. So it was a variety of things. I do think that you have more flexibility when you own the parking or have kind of an exclusive lease on it. It's much easier to deal with the parking managing companies at that point. But it's not impossible. And some of it comes down to the technology that they use or their willingness to update contracts rather than kind of your company's interest in doing daily versus monthly.
Sorry, I just think it'd be better if I ask you than try to type it. If you are in a leased space where you don't have control of your parking, but you have a good relationship with your landlord, like how would you suggest going about having a conversation about daily parking and the possibilities for it to be a benefit for our specific employees if we do partner with, for instance, 8 parking. Our office is at 500 Bellevue, 108th Avenue or whatever. So I don't know. Does my question make sense?
Is the question you're saying, how do you convince employees to do it, or how do you convince leadership to do it, or how do you discuss with the parking managers? Who would that be the discussion with?
Well, I think probably starting it would be with the landlord, the owner itself, because it is building, which parking company I believe leases out from them. So I think that would be the first conversation. I think once, yeah, that would be the first.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, well, maybe to answer your question slightly differently, we ended up having, because I mentioned there were a handful of lots, they were managed through our HR differently, like employees who were paying for them, depending on which lot they were using, they were paying differently. So a little bit depends on the technology that lot uses to be able to integrate with a system in HR versus not. And that's kind of unfortunate. And I think the parking industry is going in a positive direction of being able to charge more directly, which is easier for folks. Discussing kind of more specifically with the landlord, I think you can suggest to them that you're not going to see a dramatic drop in occupancy. We saw 10% fewer, but we do expect when folks come back, many folks are going to skew towards driving, just out of kind of convenience and perceptions around safety, whether or not those are true. And so to say to them, if we lease from you all these spots and they're monthly parking, we're likely to see very little revenue come in. We're probably going to be able to broaden the base and have more folks use it if it's a daily parking option for folks. That would be kind of how I would frame it to them, is it's also good for them. They get the revenue from folks if they're willing to try that. We did a pilot where we chunked out a handful of, I think it was like, I don't remember. It was maybe 25% of the stalls to try daily parking as a way of doing it before we rolled it out to a much larger number of stalls. And perhaps that's a conversation the landlord would try instead of redoing everything, let's try 50% of the stalls to employees who don't have existing monthly parking or something to that effect, a certain employee population, new employees perhaps.
Thank you. That was helpful.
All right. Yes, thank you, Andrew, for wonderful presentation. It's always helpful to hear from an industry leader and showing an example of daily parking, especially with our pilot that we're trying to get launched and have some people take us up on this free opportunity. So it's really good to hear, Andrew, that that's something that's been successful for you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again and finish up a little bit on some of Choose Your Way Bellevue's additional business resources and services. In the meantime, I am going to launch the second poll question. So while you're answering that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Option. Travis, what do you mean by if it were an option? So, I mean, like right now it is an option. So you're saying if you didn't have parking privileges, if that became a privilege?
So yeah, essentially if daily parking, if there was no more monthly parking and the monthly pass got shifted to daily parking instead. So it became a daily choice for each person.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and end the polling. I'll share the results out here. Majority of people said yes. So thanks for taking the time to take this quick poll again. That is the last poll question. So I'm going to go ahead and get going here. Some additional Choose Your Way Bellevue business services and additional resources. So first off, consultations. We have you can request free consultations from Choose Your Way Bellevue, whether you're looking to start a commute program or just looking to enhance your current one. We have both Nicole and I can come virtually now in a post-COVID world in person and have just kind of a one-on-one chat, go through your current needs and wants, meet you where you are and see where you want to go with your goals, and connect you with the proper resources. So for example, today, as you have seen, we have mini grant funding available as well as a daily parking pilot funding that can be available to you. And in the future, we have other programs. So free consultations, reach out if you're interested and request one. We can get one scheduled. It's free to do. In addition to that, some implementation, which is also a part of our consultation, is just assisting you in developing your program or to enhance a current aspect of your program. If you're looking to improve your van pool programming, We have good partnership, strong partnership with King County Metro and the folks over there at Vanpool. So being able to kind of guide you along to reach your commute goals. And then lastly, some incentive training and support through Rideshare Online. It is possible to create an employer network so your employees can start logging their trips, and you can provide incentives through Rideshare Online as kind of a trip logging and ride matching platform. And we're able to do some support and training for that as well. And then some additional resources. All of this is going to be free. So if you're looking, don't know where to start, or at least want to start with the kind of the basic free things. So one of the things we have on our website that we do for free is custom commute planning and some assistance for employees. So if an they just moved, or they want to know what their options are, what their bus routes are, they can go ahead and fill out a custom commute form, and we'll go ahead and fulfill that to give them the right information and all the kind of the routes and what's available to them based on what they put in, whether it's busing, biking, vanpooling, carpooling. We'll provide them with the necessary information to get them going. Again, I already mentioned about the Rideshare Online, so continued assistance in setting up an employer network for trip logging and incentives through Rideshare Online. This next bullet point's not as relevant right now in COVID, but in a post-COVID world, tabling at transportation events, whether you're having a transportation fair or transportation event, or you're launching a new program, you can invite Choose Your Way Bellevue for free to have a table at one of the events, pass out some information, provide some goodies, and kind of be there to answer any questions that your employees may have. We also have a starter transit cards, which are any employer can request up to $150 or 150 cards preloaded with $8 for Orca cards. So if you don't currently have an Orca program and you don't know where to start and you're just trying to get some cards in folks' hands, you can request up to 150 preloaded $8 Orca cards that you can disperse to your employees. And that's another free incentive. Just reach out and I can provide you with the link to request that. And then lastly, we have updated Bellevue bike maps as well as downtown pedestrian guides. Again, 2 free things. You can go ahead and request 50, 100, whatever makes sense for your work site, and we can go ahead and fulfill that to give your employees the proper information they need when they're downtown. And lastly, we do have our employer newsletter, which will give employers and property managers up-to-date information, whether it's about this mini grant program that we mentioned today, the downtown parking pilot that we mentioned today, or other case studies that you heard from Andrew. Kind of give you up to date with all things downtown Bellevue. So we have some contact information here. Again, we'll send out all the links and information you heard today. So you have ourselves, some folks at Metro, Andrew, I know there's a lot of good discussion there, and then Kate Johnson, who's with the City of Bellevue as well. We were going to have some breakout rooms, but looking at the size and just seeing kind of the lively conversation we were having earlier, I think it may be better to shift it into more of an open discussion. So we had a couple discussion questions that we just kind of want to open the floor with. And that is, what are the current return to office plans for your organization? Do you currently have any? Are you thinking through some? Wanted to open the floor and let folks kind of pick each other's brains and see where everybody's at. So yeah, any return to office plans that are currently being discussed? Or is anybody curious what anybody else is doing?
So I'll talk. My name is Tracy Jones. I'm with VMware. Like I mentioned earlier, we are in 500 108th Avenue in downtown Bellevue. We are aiming for September for a return to office date. And we are trying to manage not only what that looks like internally as far as seating, but also what that means for commutes and our employees now having the flexible option to work from home or in the office. So that's really all I have as a plan. We're trying to work everything else out right now. So that's why I was interested in the call.
Thanks for sharing, Tracy. I know it's kind of tough to, it's a balancing act, I know right now, with new information coming.
Well, I appreciate that you guys are doing this. PSC is in much the same position as Tracy is. And a lot of people have chosen to continue working from home like 100% of the time. So we too we're trying to do a head count and get set up. So, you know, our Bellevue location offers a lot more challenges for us because of the parking issue, whereas all of our other office locations, you know, parking is part of, it's plentiful on the outside of each of the buildings. So, and, you know, but I'm trying to work on figuring out how to encourage lots of people to commute rather than driving, just because, yeah, you know, I told my husband, I said, we're kind of like those retired people that just sit in their house all the time and they don't know what's happening around them. They don't know how their community is changing. And so it's the same thing. I was running errands and I'm like, oh my gosh, downtown Bellevue has changed. The density level, the housing density level, there's so much that has gone on. And so it is concerning for me it's not concerning for me. I live very close to where I work, but just for all of these people hitting the road. And if everyone chooses not to do mass transit or carpooling, it's going to be worse than we've ever seen it. So I'm trying to keep people from spending, you know, hours in their cars. So we'll see how successful I am.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kevin. That helps a lot. Anybody else, any other current return to office plans for your organization or any discussions that are ongoing? I know it's kind of tricky, but I'll leave that one open. And if not, we had one other question, which was, are there any tools that would help support planning efforts? You learned today about the mini grant program and the downtown parking pilot. Whether it's one of those or maybe something totally different, we're here to support. So is there any tools that may be beneficial or anything that we can provide, whether it's information or whatever it is? What tools may help you as you kind of plan your reopening?
I figure I'm going to be reaching out to you down the road once I have more solid information from the company side.
I mean, I can speak for Expedia Group. Employees have the option to work from the office currently, but only something to the effect of 50 or 100 at a time. So it's a very small number of people who can actually be there. It's all optional. It's mostly kind of outside seating and things. So it's not really open for business. There's not a set return date, and I think the details are kind of, people are going back and forth just on exactly when that would want to be implemented and the speed at which it implements. One of the things that we're looking at for returning is both the messaging, as kind of Catherine, as you were saying, like we're looking ahead and saying, oh man, people haven't done this in a while, kind of treating it a little bit like this is their first commute again. So thinking a little bit like, using a metaphor of like, you have to stretch before you run, you know, like, let's get back in the habit of talking to employees like, hey, you're about to come to the office, providing them with the resources. We divvy up folks into neighborhoods often so we can have a more specific conversation with them. I don't know how many folks for Bellevue, for y'all, live in West Seattle. We've had a lot of folks move to West Seattle, but without a bridge, the commute becomes harder, but that's not a conversation everyone needs to be having.
Yeah.
It's much more specific. We try and focus on the specific community, and that speaks to transit concerns, that speaks to carpooling. All of the things are often more specific, and so it's a more helpful conversation to say, we think you're coming back. Let's talk about, you know, the new bus line that opened up, or the changes that Sound Transit implemented since you've been gone, things like that.
Yeah. I attended a all-day meeting yesterday with the ACT. I don't actually know what that stands for, program, but it was a national conference that they were doing. And the biggest helper question for me was that we need to do a survey asking our working people, you know, how they intend to commute to work. And, you know, and then as I'm doing this, I'm realizing, yes, there's so many more questions I can ask on here. Have you considered van pooling? You know, do you need help with this? You know, just to see where we can start assisting. Because we have over 3,000 employees that we need to, and they're spread out from, you know, from Bellingham clear down to Olympia, so, and over to the peninsula. So, and not all of those areas have to be as concerned about the commute as, you know, we do in the Seattle area, in the Tacoma area. So anyway, but yeah, I thought, oh, good. That was worth the whole day, is do a survey.
Has there been any thought or communication around the incoming Amazon presence in downtown Bellevue and the effects on parking with that? Or maybe that might be a whole nother call, but.
Yeah, so there's obviously, if you've been to downtown Bellevue at all recently, you see a bunch of construction. A lot of that, especially some of the new towers that are going up, it'll be 600 feet, are going to be predominantly, we're all Amazon employees. And so there's going to be an influx. I think it was 25,000 employees coming to downtown Bellevue in the next few years. Yeah, I know that's an ongoing discussion, is kind of the road capacity, parking capacity. And I think it was something that Catherine was saying is, you know, if everybody chooses not to take transit or not carpool, you know, imagine the stress on our current infrastructure. It'll be worse than before. I think it was something Catherine said, which is, it's spot on. And I think that's kind of from our perspective over here in partnership with both King County and the city of Bellevue, is looking at how can we alleviate that? Obviously, there's some infrastructure things that are out of our control, but how can we support that through programming and funding and incentives and things that we can provide to employers so they can provide to their employees. So something like increasing flexibility, something as kind of simple as Andrew was talking about, is daily parking, is giving them that choice where on average everybody drives a little less, can kind of really, especially in multi-tenant buildings, when you only have a certain percentage of the allotted parking supply, how do you better manage that as people return? But yeah, Tracy, that's kind of the $1 million question, is, especially as downtown Bellevue continues to grow, is how is that going to impact both parking supply and just our overall transit system, our current infrastructure, our roads. I don't know if that helped a little bit to answer. I don't have all the answers on that, as I know that's still an ongoing kind of discussion a little higher up. But from our perspective, it's looking at how can we provide flexibility and get people out of their cars and into other modes or into non-drive-alone modes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do understand it is a big question. We're trying to figure it out ourselves, so thank you.
Okay, well, if nobody else has anything else to add on that, just wanted to thank everybody for spending about an hour with us, and hopefully you're able to learn some valuable information, some pretty good takeaways, whether it's some of our current programming or hearing a great case study over at Expedia Group. Again, a link to this recording will be sent out, as well as some of the links to the programmings that you have heard about today. So if you're interested in anything like that, go ahead and click those links and register and sign up. If you have any questions for any of us, our contact information was on one of those slides, which will get sent out as well. The slide deck will get sent out. So feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any other additional questions. So with all that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and just want to thank everyone for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.